a lot of interesting encounter stories that he has personally been involved with. So I want to go ahead and welcome Bill to the show. Bill, you're aware of Bobby's story.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, that thing's sitting there beckoning to him. It's like, holy crap, that just sends chills down your spine thinking about that.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting stories. I was trying to get him on because I really wanted him to tell the story on the air. And I was talking with Tim Sermons about this. Bobby's story is just, it reminds me, I don't know, have you ever heard of the Cowman story?
No, I don't think so.
Well, the Cowman story is very identical to Bobby's story. And what happened in the Cowman story was a little kid who called these things a cowman. He said it stunk like a cow. And I guess some of the coloring it had was like a cow, so the little boy used to call it the cowman. What happened is this thing would come up to the little boy's window at night and kind of do the same type of thing that Bobby's describing. It would use its finger to kind of direct him to the window. He'd go to the window. The creature would make faces, and the little boy would make faces back at the creature. You don't know if there's something sinister going on there. You don't know if there's something...
They're after kids. I firmly believe they're after kids. I used to work with a guy, full-blood Cherokee fella, that lived near Stillwell, Oklahoma, and he knew I was into Bigfoot, but it took him a while before he realized how serious I was about it, and then he opened up to me about something happened to him that just, it shocks to hear. But when he was a little kid, I remember playing up in his yard. They lived out in the country. As he saw this bear man come out of the woods, and he said, I wasn't afraid of it. I was looking at it, and it was looking at me. And he said, the thing picked me up, and it just started walking towards the woods with me. He said, the whole time I wasn't afraid. I wasn't feeling fear. And then he heard his mother screaming, and he kind of tried to look around, and he sees her coming across their yard with a broom. And he says, at that moment, he just realized something wasn't right. He says that thing dropped him and took off running into the woods, and she scooped him up and ran to the house. And he said it wasn't too long after that they moved out of there. But it's like, my God, what was that thing going to do with him? But
yeah, it was probably going to eat him. I hate to say that.
I don't doubt it a dadgum bit.
Yeah, I don't doubt
really
it either. But even in like Bobby Hamilton's story, he's the co-founder of the GCBRO, and what he describes in his encounter was it motioning for him to come to the window, which is very human-like behavior. Very human-like behavior. And it's just terrifying to... Yeah, you hear all of these stories about kids that go missing. They're out hiking, and then you wonder what happens to them. Well, kind of reminds you of what's that story David Pilates was talking about, where
missing 411.
Yeah, missing 411, and one of the witnesses, the Dennis Martin case, one of the witnesses said that a bear running on two legs had what looked like a boy over his shoulder running through the woods. I hate to hear stuff like that.
You hear, as a parent, that just strikes me to the core. It just, people need to know that going out in the woods and enjoying nature is great, but you've got to be prepared. You got to know what the hell's out there, because these things are out, and I definitely believe they hunt children. At our place in eastern Oklahoma, I've been going down there. We've had a place since the early 70s, and several years ago, we had, I think it's an act of aggression where there was two of them trying to push my two kids down a road, trying to force them down a road away from the cabin. And I know they sure as hell wasn't planning on playing with them. But what happened was where our place is, we have a cabin. It's up on top of this acreage that we've got. It's about, probably 700-foot elevation. But you go up this road to get to it. Off to the right, it drops off down into a canyon that just basically runs straight north towards I-40. Well, the kids went out there and they started walking down the road looking for arrowheads, and there's a tree, they call it the rock hollow tree. They'd go up there, and it's right on the edge of the canyon by the road, and they would throw rocks off in there, and hear thump and echo going down into that hollow tree. They was doing that, and they heard a lot of movement down at the bottom of the canyon. So my daughter's thinking, oh, that's deer. So she gets her phone out. She's going to get video of these deer, and my son picks a rock up, and he chunks it way off down in there. And holy smokes, all hell broke loose. Said rocks started coming back at them, and they're thinking, this is not deer. This is something else. Then they started hearing this thing screaming. And they're thinking, we got to get back to the cabin. Well, they're halfway down that road. Well, they start to get back up the road to the cabin, and off to they're facing north. Off to their right is a ridge, off to their right, and rocks started coming from there, and then they started hearing screams. And the more they was going towards the cabin, they could tell these two animals, whatever the heck it was screaming, was going towards the road, trying to, kind of like an impediment movement to keep them from getting up to the cabin. So they started going down the road. And then Joel, my son, realized that we got to get help. So daughter's on the phone, calling for help, and we go flying down there, and I'm honking on the truck horn, and when I come around this bend, I see him standing there, and the daughter is just in a blind panic. He's got her, and he carries a rifle with him when he goes out in the woods, AK-74, and he's got the canyon covered, and they are just scared to death. And I firmly believe those things are trying to force on that road where they could ambush them. That's the only I can say the only act of aggression we had on that place. You got to be prepared. And the funny thing of it is that you're going to get the video. Well, when all this started breaking loose, she was able to record just a tiny bit of it, and you can, on what she got, you can barely hear the screen winding down, and then you hear my horn on the truck honking in the distance, and it was like they were ready to get in the back of that truck and get the heck out of there.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I wanted to ask you, I want to talk about the Chicken Man first, and then I want to talk about some of your experiences and some of your encounters. And I really do appreciate you coming on the show, Bill, because, it's so hard to get people from your area, like you and I talked about yesterday. It's so hard to get people from the Midwest and the South to come out and talk about this, because I think that's really the gold mine as far as I'm starting to learn that's where the gold mine is as far as encounter stories. But it's in the same breath, it's so hard to get people from that area to come out and say, okay, here's what we're seeing. Here's what I've experienced. Here's what, especially someone in law enforcement. So I really do appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, it's just, people just don't like to get ridiculed. I went through that with my El Reno Chicken Man deal when I told my family members about it. And I just, I said, well, hell with it then. I just quit talking about it to them and kind of kept it to myself. And I saw on your website there that, you had posted an article about that. And that's what inspired me to give you a call, because, a buddy of mine ran into, I know it was a thing. Before that all broke loose. So it was pretty wild.
Well, tell us about it. What happened with you and your friend, and then we can go into the chicken man story.
Well, it was a buddy and I went coon hunting, and it was close to the end of 1970, I guess. It was a full moon. There was snow on the ground. It wasn't snow. It was just enough to cover everything. And with the full moon, it just was pretty bright out there. But we had gone north out of El Reno towards the river, and we went up to a place called Foreman Bridge, and then you could veer off to the right towards the east and park parallel to the banks of the river. And I went out there and didn't have much luck, so it was about 2 or so in the morning. We were sitting back at the vehicle, a cup of coffee, trying to warm up. I look up the road and I see this skunk just kind of diddy-bopping down the road with the truck. And would you skin him? And at least he won't go home empty-handed. And he said, sure. So I got out and drew a bead on that rascal, and I'm standing there, and it felt like I just rubbed the hairs on the back of my neck. I mean, the hackles were standing up, and I knew something wasn't right. I had that feeling I was being watched. I looked over to my right towards the edge of that river, and there's a tree laying on its side, a big tree trunk, and I see this black spot or black shape on the other side of the tree trunk, and I'm thinking, well, what the hell's casting that shadow? So I'm looking up the full moon, and I'm looking back at the tree trunk, and then I see this bright red light come on. Like, first thing I thought of was a red reflector. You know, sometimes people nail reflectors on the trees, you know, on each side of their entrance to a driveway. So I'm looking at that. Well, dadgum, another one pops open. And so now I got two of these things looking at me. They're just the purest bright red. And they're probably about the size of pop bottles, the ends of pop bottles. And I'm looking at it, and I hollered at my friend. I said, hey, get out here and take a look at this. And when he gets out, that's when this thing, you can see it coming up in the air, and this sucker is tall, it's wide, and it's thick. And you can see it blinking its eyes and moving its head. And I don't know if it was reflecting from the moon, from the dome light in that vehicle, but it probably was just a few seconds, and that thing rolled off the side of that bank of that river, and you could hear it crashing down through all the brush and junk and all that was there, and it hit the ice because the river was frozen. Now, it's not like a solid body of water. There's sandbars from kind of one side to the other, and that rascal took off running towards the west, and you can hear it crunching through the ice and getting on the sandbars, and just, I mean, boom, 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 it was gone. And so we're like, well, what in the hell was that thing? We can't tell anybody about it because this thing we're out here smoking up or something. So we kept it to ourselves. Well, it's no time after that. That's when the El Rayo Chicken Man story broke. Well, that happened. That incident there was several miles west of where we were at. On the south side of Highway 81, we're across that North Canadian River. To the south of the river, and it's on the west side of the road. There's a huge slough or a ditch that runs parallel to the river and runs in right into it. And whatever the thing was, come up out of that river, and I think it stayed concealed in that channel or that slough, and then it went up to the Palmer house. It's a rent house with chicken coops and things there, and it literally tore that house all to pieces, the chicken house. Ripped the door off, killed all the poultry in it, left footprints, bloody handprints, just, I don't know if it was eating them or what, but then it went back down that channel back to the river. There's no doubt in my mind it was probably the same thing that my buddy and I saw. Well, just you cross that bridge and you go a little further north, and you come up to the Concho Indian Reservation. They've got a casino there, and years later, after our incident, just a few years back in the past, their security cameras caught one of those filling up, getting in their trash bins and their grease traps, and they got that documented. But it's something that the tribal police are not going to turn loose to the public. But it darn sure did get recorded, because I know of a dispatcher that got to see the tape. So that one particular area there has had sightings going on for years.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the Indian, the reservation, the casino there. But on the Chicken Man incident with Palmer, the farmer, you know, there was so much evidence, and it's kind of a shame that this took place. I think it was the late 60s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 70.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that it took place in that time era, because there was so much evidence collected. There was the footprints, there was the blood, there was the hair. Even on the door that it had broken, it had left a bloody handprint, and he had actually taken the door off, and he took it to a local zoo, didn't he, and had a primatologist look at it?
Yeah, Lawrence Curtis was the director of the zoo at that time, and that's definitely a primate humanoid type hand. I talked to one of the officers. He's deceased now, but at that time I talked to one of the officers, that was out there at the scene, and he was definitely shook. So this is the craziest thing he'd ever seen. It definitely wasn't just a bunch of vandals coming up to somebody's chicken coop and tearing things up.
And what's interesting is it didn't really eat any of the chickens. It just killed them. Just broke their necks, didn't it?
Right. Yep. Just messed them up. Stomped on, from what he was telling me, that stomped on and just killed. It was like just getting in there for the heck of it.
And it's interesting, too. I think just a couple miles from there, and you probably know this better than I do, Bill, but a couple miles from there was another gentleman who was saying there's a loose orangutan out in the woods, and he was trying to trap it. He kept describing this large, upright orangutan running around. I don't know too many orangutans that could survive out there in Oklahoma.
I don't either, no, sir. But there's, for years, people have been seeing, I think it's a family group of them. It's at least three of them. And I just believe it's a family group. And I don't know if that's what he was seeing, but if it's in that general area, it most likely was. But then again, people they keep to themselves, and they're not going to tell folks about it, outsiders about it, because they just don't want to get ridiculed. And
that's the thing about this. That's the whole shame, is that when you do come out, you do get ridiculed for, there's always people trying to tear apart people's stories, and it's kind of a shame, it's kind of people should be free to come out and say, hey, I saw this out in the woods, or hey, I experienced this. It kind of goes back, I was talking about and I'll get to the casino incident here in a minute, but I was talking about lights the other couple shows back, and I was talking about these lights people are seeing. I just got a flood of people who contacted me and said, hey, yeah, I saw these lights, and so, it's kind of a shame that people can't, it takes one person to come forward and say, hey, it's okay to talk about this. And then all of a sudden everyone will come and say, hey, I saw this. I had a lady who just sent me a message on Facebook and said that, they were out hiking and they had seen these lights and they didn't know what they were. And she said, no, it wasn't a UFO. She said it was just these weird lights flying around in the forest. And her mother got terrified, and they ran and they left. Well, they had made a pact not to tell anyone because she was so afraid of being ridiculed over just seeing lights in the forest. I know exactly how they feel, because that's what my buddy and I basically did when we ran into that hill out on the bridge. The incident at the casino is an interesting incident, and you and I talked about that too yesterday, and I think you hit it right on the head, which I didn't really think about, because in my mind I was thinking, this is great advertisement. This would be great to have people come to the casino. And for the people listening, basically what happened is, on this Indian reservation out there in Oklahoma, they had captured a Sasquatch walking across the parking lot, digging into a dumpster, and then basically exiting. But where they had actually captured it, from people who have seen the film, have come forward and said it's really, really clear footage, and the thing is huge. And I always wondered why they wouldn't release it. I always wondered why they wouldn't come forward and say, hey, look, here's what we have. Because I've heard through third party, second and third parties that have seen it, that it's probably some of the best footage out there. They know these things are out there. They know they exist, and it's just part of life, and they're just gonna just accept it for what it is. They don't want a bunch of people out there running around with rifles looking for this thing to try and shoot it. It's just, I can see their point, but that's what that's all. They definitely was not going to turn it loose to the public to keep people out from coming up there with problems and trying to hunt these things. You know they're there. You just leave them alone, and you kind of coexist, I guess you could say. Yeah, and I didn't think about, imagine if you had someone come out, blast it, and then leave. Now the casino might have a bigger issue on their hand than they might look back and go, well, we regret letting that video out. It's not uncommon for ever a couple of years to read in the paper about how some guys have been arrested for trespassing out there. The sheriffs get called, they go out there, and there's a bunch of guys with rifles and spotlights, and they're basically for the Bigfoot.
And it's like, good gosh, people's got cattle out there, they've got homes out there. They don't need a bunch of folks running around taking pot shots, things moving in the dark. It's just not safe.
Yeah. Now talk a little bit, Bill. You had a property and you had these things out around your property. I know you started talking about it there in the beginning, but can you talk about some of the things you experienced around your property?
Sure. Oh, yes. We've got, it's an acreage there in eastern Oklahoma. We're sitting out there one night cooking up hot dogs and stuff, and every now and then I'd get up with my flashlight and scan the pond, just looking for eye shine, raccoons or possums or anything. Well, I'm scanning out towards our target we got set up, and I see this tan-colored, kind of like deer-colored animal coming up out of the woods, out of that canyon, right by our 100-yard target. And he's got these bright, kind of goldish green eyes. And I'm thinking, this has got to be a buck as big as this thing is. So we're all looking at this thing. Now, my light isn't powerful enough to give you good detail. You can just kind of see the shape and coloring and then the bright eyes. And we're all looking at it, and I thought, my gosh, this thing is huge. And then it starts raising up. And then I'm thinking, well, what in the hell is that deer eating on? Because they'll stand up on their back legs and browse off the little branches and stuff. And he didn't go back down to the ground. He just stood there. And it's like, good gosh, this thing is huge. Well, we're looking at it, and then it starts swinging or swinging sideways, left, right, at us. And I thought, oh, this can't be good.
It starts swaying on you back and forth.
Swaying left, just kind of rocking side to side. And right at that time, you know, I kind of had that feeling like, oh, something's about to happen. Well, I had a rifle with me, so I cracked off a shot straight up in the. Well, that thing took off running back down the canyon. Everybody on the picnic, they took off running back towards the cabin, and that barbecue come to an end. But that's the first time we actually saw anything. But then over the years, we started figuring out a pattern. Things got most active twice a year. In the June, around July, when all the wild blackberries were on the bushes. I mean, they're all over that place down there. And then the other time of the year would be, deer season, when the persimmon trees were just covered with persimmon. And we got persimmon trees all around that cabin, and we put the blackberries off in the fields behind the cabin. But we'd get out there, and about June or so, and I'd start blowing either wounded, like rabbit calls or predator calls, or I could do, and start getting responses. We had we were sitting out there with kids, and we had this deal happen to us. It was really strange. We heard a hoot owl way off in the woods, so I hollered back at it, and right off the bat, it hollered back, and it sounded really loud, and it sounded kind of different. Something wasn't quite right. So I hooted again, and then a second one responded down in that canyon. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, I hooted again, and then the first one we heard straight to our west went off, and then the one down in the canyon went off, and they were getting closer, and they were getting louder. And I knew then that wasn't a hoot owl, because the way they were mimicking them, but they were not owl. Well, I hollered one more time, and I mean, you could hear stuff tearing through the woods, and I was sitting there thinking, my gosh, we're about to see some things combusting out of the tree line. Well, you hear this stuff crashing through the woods, and boom, like someone hit the air brakes right up the brakes and just stopped, dead silent. And then it was like boom, boom, boom. Those trees started shaking, and it sounded like in the old Tarzan movie. The chief got mad, and he started hopping, doing that scream, that mad monkey call and yell. That's what was happening. Well, I thought, I got to get the kids out of here. We hauled ourselves back up to the cabin. Went back out there just a little while, me and my older son, and it was just dead silence out there. I mean, there wasn't any frogs chirping around the pond, no nothing. And it happened several times over the years. Well, the last time we tried that, we was out there with my kids, and we had our hound with us, and I was blowing on a wounded rabbit call. 11:30 or so, and I decided we got to get back up to the cabin and get something to drink, because my throat was dry, and And so I left my rifle there with some other kids, and the hound was there, and then my son and I started walking towards the cabin. Well, we're walking up towards the cabin, and I've got that lantern going by the front, so it's kind of blinding us. Just as we come to the front door, my wife's inside the cabin at the kitchen, at the sink, and there's a window there. Well, she screams my name real loud, and then the kids start screaming out there at the picnic table. And so I go running back out there, and they're all up under that table. And it's like, what's going on? What's happened? They go, didn't you see that? Didn't you see that? I go, what? He says, there was something, a man or something, walking around this pond, walking towards the back side of the cabin as my son and I was walking towards the front door. We were kind of on a path we would intersect, but this thing went behind the cabin, and as it went past the cabin, it kind of turned a little bit and looked at my wife through the window there, and she thought that was me jumping out to scare her. So she hollered my name, and that's about the time the kids just started cutting loose. So, well, we gathered them all up and went running back inside, and same thing. We went back out with our rifles, and it was just dead silence out there.
You know, it's interesting, how they maneuver around you. I mean, even in my own encounter, just how they tactically maneuver around you, and then even being out there in Texas with Bob, and hearing this thing maneuver around, it was obviously moving to the rear of us, which made me uncomfortable to say the least, but it was definitely maneuvering to the rear of us, trying to get behind us. And then,
just trying to ambush you.
Yeah, that's what it felt like it was trying to ambush us. It wasn't really a direct coming right at you. It was almost more like an ambush is what it felt like. And then in your own situation, you guys are walking to the front of a cabin, and, it kind of comes around towards the rear, where you guys are at. Interesting.
There's a couple big pine trees and a few persimmon trees, and they kept those between us and him. So, that may be one of the reasons we didn't see it, but it definitely knew what it was doing. If it wanted to, it could have run up there and grabbed us, probably been on us before we knew it, but evidently it wasn't interested in that, but it sure come walking around that cabin. Sure did.
Yeah, I kind of have a theory about that. And I could be way off on my theory. Like I've always said before on the show, I don't have one in my garage. I'm in a cage I'm studying. But I have my theory on it is I think if you're alone, you're in trouble. Or if you're a child or a woman and you're out there by yourself, you're in trouble. If you're within a group of people, it seems like a lot less bad things happen. And I don't know if it's something on their end when it's almost too much of it's too risky of a fight because you don't know, on their end, it's too many to, things can go bad on their part, which gives them a huge intelligence. Cause I don't know that I think a grizzly bear, if they're going to attack you, they're just going to attack you. These things seem to be more tactical in their attacks, or like you were describing with the child in the beginning with your friend who was picked up by one. It was easy meal until the mother comes out and starts flipping out, and then it drops it and decides, it's kind of a self-preservation on its own part, decides it's not worth taking this and it's time to go.
Well, she's carrying a broom. He said she was swinging that broom, and I've often wondered, maybe that thing thought that might have been a rifle or some kind of weapon.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the first thing I thought, is I bet it thought it was a weapon. I bet it thought it was a rifle.
Yep, I firmly believe these things know, they understand what those rifles and pistols are all about, and I think you're right about that being alone in the woods deal. They're going to come up there like a predator, and they're going to snatch the stragglers, or the ones that are way in front, the scouts. They're going to get the people that are off on their own. And it's just probably too much of a fight or too much of a chance of getting hurt was to just go busting in there and try and snatch some people out of a group. Yeah. So I know down here, you can see a group of guys in the woods, you can pretty well count they're going to be armed because there's woolly boogers out there.
Yeah, and that's the other interesting point I wanted to bring up is down in the South, sometimes it's hard to find historical accounts about things that happen in the South unless you know what the locals named the creature at the time, like the corn man or the chicken man or woolly booger. You know, if you're looking for Bigfoot or Sasquatch by name down in the South and in the Midwest, it's kind of hard to come by some information. But if you know what the locals call it, you'll find historical accounts going back hundreds of years of people seeing these things. They just had their own names for them.
Yeah, that's right. Like there in McCurtain County, there's a newspaper been around since the early 1800s, and they had several stories in there, like 1840s or so, of the McCurtain County man beast or manimal. They'll use the word manimal. So if you're doing searches like on the internet and all that, if you type in those words, you'll probably come up with those. But then again, you need to know what phrases or terminology to actually go put in to look for.
Now, you've never been in a situation where you were called out as a police officer to a scene to where someone is saying either a prowler's coming around, but there was one situation that you were involved in, and was it missing people?
Right. This was in the late 70s. I was with a group that formed up here in Oklahoma about interested in Bigfoot and things like that. And there was a group in Missouri, same deal. It went out looking for Bigfoot and all. Well, they were contacted by local authorities, and then they in turn contacted our group, and so we went on up there to see what we could figure out. But basically what it was a family had gone missing. They had a trailer home out on the acreage, and this thing had the door just literally peeled back. They were gone. The people was gone. There was huge footprints all over the place. There was blood stains everywhere, and there's like something happened, something bad happened. And the authorities were just trying to partake on what we thought it might be, because these were huge handprints and huge footprints. And I basically told them, well, I think it's a Bigfoot. Something's happened where one of them got in there and got these folks. Well, that just unheard of. They just could hardly believe that, and you know, we ended up coming back to Oklahoma, but I never did hear how that ended up. But definitely something had peeled that door back. I mean, just peeled it like it's opening the top of a can, a sardine can. Drug them out of there is what I'm thinking.
What's interesting is you don't really ever get to hear the final explanation on what had happened. There was an incident out here in Oregon, I want to say back in the 70s or 80s, and there was a gentleman who owned a bunch of land, and he was a logger. He was out logging the land, and I guess he did pretty well. But he had just recently moved to the area, and he was out there logging. The gentleman ended up not showing up. No one had heard from the family in a while, so they sent cops out to check on the family. And nothing really ever came of it. No one ever really said. They just ended up being missing. And there was a researcher who had been trying to get a hold of, but a researcher that was out actually looking into that incident. This was like about 6 months after the people disappeared. And he had found the property of where they were at. And what he describes the property as, he said it looked like King Kong went through, and basically there was blood. A lot of the items that were in the house were outside of the house. The door was ripped off. There was the inside, there was holes in the ceiling, and it just looked like hell had broke loose in there. And he said there was still footprints around that piece of that trailer that the family was in, or the mobile home that they were in. Nothing ever came of it. You never really hear the final story on. They just end up being missing, and the rest of that was just kind of swept under the rug as far as what happened to them. So it makes you wonder, too, what would set something like this off.
Well, there's something. I was able to read a report from a Penny South map that was similar to that. These folks called and had the sheriff come out, and said there was what they thought was prowlers or there's something out in the woods, and it's bothering their livestock. Well, they get a call, authorities get a call sometime later, and they come flying out there, and this house has been torn all to hell. I mean, the back door's been ripped open, ripped off the hinges, the house, it looked like a tornado went through there. basically what happened was the husband was out there, and he went after this woolly booger, and he took some pot shots at it with his shotgun. And that damn thing followed him home, and it tried to put the hurt on him. It tore that place up. They was able to get to the truck and get out of there in time. When the sheriff's office showed up, it was crazy. He said the dadgum shotgun actually was laying on the floor, and the barrel had a huge bend in it. It was like it was maybe focused on that shotgun. I don't know, because it might have hurt it. I don't know, but it just destroyed that house. And if they hadn't got out of there, I'm firmly convinced it would have got them. Because it was mad, because he took some shots at this thing. So you got to be careful what you're doing out there. I'm in scouting, and I do a lot of hunting, and I tell everybody I have contacts with out in the woods that there's things you can do and you can't do as far as these things go. Because you make them mad, you're going to have to get out of there, because they will get mad and come out for revenge. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and that's the point about a lot of these stories. What's interesting is when you read through a lot of these encounter stories, you start to see a lot of repeated type behavior, like in the Cowman incident. And it made me think of Bobby Hamilton, and what you had just said on this last one is, and are you familiar with the Cowman incident, Bill?
No, sir. No, I'm not.
I'll have to send it to you. What ended up happening is it was up at the window. The wife started screaming, and they started trying to shoot this thing, because it was coming up to the house, and it was starting to get aggressive. And it seemed to be focused on this little kid that the family had. It seemed to be at night it would come up to his window, and it would, they would make faces, and it seemed to be really focused on the little kid. And they ended up shooting it. And so they left the house that night. They were so terrified, they ended up shooting this creature. Terrified, they all ran to the car, got in the car, left the house, and didn't come back. I don't think he came back for a day or two, but when he came back, the whole house had been torn apart. Everything in the house was completely demolished. They turned it in, I think they ended up turning it into the insurance company, but the whole house had been completely demolished. And what's interesting is the kid's room, the one kid that it was focused on, was left alone, but everywhere else in the house was completely torn apart. You just hear that over and over and over again. It's kind of like what Mike Humphreys used to tell me from the Siege of Hanabi. If you shoot one,
yeah, down at Hanabi. Yep.
Yeah, he used to tell me if you shoot one, chamber another round, because you're going to need it. And
that's right. Yeah, if you hurt one, kill one. You got those family members to deal with, or that group that's with that you don't see. Those are the ones going to be sneaking up on you. Because you're going to have one out there drawing your attention, but you might have 2 or 3 coming up on your backside. So, yeah, definitely, you have to be careful what you do out there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, there's so much physical evidence. This is such a fascinating topic because there's so much physical evidence that, I'm sure as you know this as a police officer, there's so many witnesses that are basically describing the same thing. There's some differences in what they describe, but the differences are based on what location they're at in the United States. But for the most part, everyone's describing the same type of creature. And then there is so much evidence. There's the footprints, there's the hair, there's the blood, it's just amazing to me that the government doesn't come out, or science doesn't come out and say, you know what, this thing is out there running around, and there's just too much evidence to say it's not.
I firmly believe that there are people, authorities within the government that know what's going on. I don't know why they're not releasing it or acknowledging it publicly. It could be economic reasons, through like endangered species type stuff. I don't know. We got a deal going on over there. A bridge construction has been halted for a specific type of little catfish to get through their spawning and all that, where this construction site is, before they can continue on. So it's going to be shut down probably till June because of that. So I could see where, if they could come out, yep, these things do exist. Now we got to find out how many there are. We got to protect them. Well, what's going to happen to all that property that they're on? Like if you own this land, or can you Can you continue farming it or harvesting timber? You know, it could have some economic impact.
I think it would bring the economy to its knees. And people laugh at that, but I really think it'd bring the economy to its knees. You know, they'll say, well, what is it just going to stop lumber? Well, think about all the things that lumber touches. Lumber is more than just the lumber industry. It's this tree of other industries that it touches. And then you're right. The people who are going to be the most upset when a hunter or someone shoots one of these things and brings it in are the people that own the land around where these things are at, because that land's going to be taken from them.
Yep. That's right. And think about the national parks. Would you take your family camping in a national park if it was for sure things out there that could snatch your kids up or you? I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, it would cripple the outdoor activities too as well.
Yep.
Do you still have things going on in your property? Or do you still own that piece of property?
Sir. Yeah, it's mainly like twice a year, into June, July, and then in the fall when they're up there getting the persimmons. I had not long ago was down there, and when we're down there, we don't have the outside lights on, just to have little critters come up. We can watch them in the yard and all, but I forgot. I didn't know if I'd rolled my truck windows up. So I stepped out the front door and lit my truck up with my work light. And, no sooner that light came on, and it sounded like a bear and a bull roaring at the same time. And it came from in front of me at the pond. And I couldn't move. All I could do was kind of pivot. But I felt my organs vibrating, my chest vibrating. You could just feel that hitting you. And I pivoted at my hips and shined the light, just holding it out like at the truck, and I pivot, and you can see this rascal standing there by the pond. He's kind of leaning forward, and he had an arm stretched out a little bit. And to me, it seemed like either he's getting him a drink of water or he's shoving a frog or something in his mouth. I don't know, but boom, off that thing went, running right towards our 100-yard target and right down that canyon. You can hear him busting all through there. But, that we still have things happen every now and then. And we definitely, keep our eyes and ears open. Now December, we went down there, for a family trip, and, we took our metal detectors with us because there's old homesteads around there. So we was off in the woods where some of these places where we was doing some metal detecting. So we got through and we go back, walking back towards the trucks, and we see a dadgum footprint in this pile of dirt. And it's a canine type print. But this sucker is like 6 inches by 6 inches. It's huge. The toes are all splayed out. You can see the claws on it. So I thought, well, good gosh. Well, we ran to town, got some plaster repairs, came back, and we made some casts of this thing. And when we pulled that out of the dirt the next day and brushed it off, it just shocked us that there's something that damn big out there. And we've got coyotes, we got bears, we got mountain lions there. This wasn't any of that. This thing was huge. So I sent some pictures off to a fellow that's into the dog man that has some expertise on the subject, and he just see what he thought about it. And sure enough, he goes, buddy, I would definitely say you got him on your place now. But that's the first time in all these years we've ever seen anything like that. So we get to looking around, and we go off down in the bottoms, and we start finding these prints all over down there. So I don't know if something has moved in or what, but this darn sure isn't a wolf. It's too big for that. So we definitely are careful when we're out running around out there in the place.
Yeah, and I don't know what to think of that dogman thing anymore. There is a type of Sasquatch that does kind of have, and I know I'm going to use the wrong term, I'm sure I'm going to get corrected on it, but a snout, or a muzzle. And because people have described it, and so there is a type that has that. And whether it's a deformity or what it is, I don't know. But there is a type where people describe it having a snout. But what's interesting in their descriptions is they are describing a Sasquatch, but they're describing it having a snout. Now, this other
Yeah.
thing out there running around, I don't know what to think of it because I think I've mentioned on the show in the past, I've talked to several credible witnesses that came out and basically said, you're wrong on this being a primate. They would go with their descriptions, and some of these other descriptions that you listen to people tell, it sounds very canine. It sounds like it has a huge jaw, like a wolf. It has ears like a wolf. But I would say more of the body of a skinny Sasquatch is basically what they describe, but with long claws on the hands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the tracks I found down in Texas, I can tell you, almost 100% sure were not Sasquatch tracks. They were something else.
Yeah, more dog-like.
Very much more like dog-like tracks. Yeah.
Well, since we found that print, I've been checking, and in eastern Oklahoma, around the Kiamishi Mountains, they have been seeing things they call the hissing critter, and it's basically, I would guess, a dog man. And people have seen these things while they're out deer hunting, and it seems like there's packs or groups of them. People have reported these things chasing deer down, chasing the hunters out of the woods. So, I don't know if these things have migrated over to our neck of the woods now or what, but that's a whole new ball game there. That's something I don't quite know what to think about. I know I don't want one getting near me because I don't think he's going to have the same attitude or outlook as a Sasquatch would.
Yeah, they tend to be a lot more aggressive. I've talked to a few guys down there in Texas that describe these dogman type creatures. And I hate the name dogman, but I guess I'll just keep using it.
Yeah.
But they describe these dogman like creatures, and it's kind of, and for people listening, it's hard to understand. When you're down there and you're a local down there, they'll talk about Sasquatch the same way they'll talk about wild hogs, the same way they'll talk about alligators, the same way they'll talk about snakes. It's just a fact of life. You'll run into these things. But the moment you bring up this dogman, the guys that have ran into it, they're first to tell you that with the Sasquatch, they're kind of iffy on shooting one. They're, unless one's coming at them. Most people think of hunters as bloodthirsty monster of people, but they're really not. They're actually, most hunters, I will say, in my case, every hunter I've ever met is probably one of the most ethical people you'll meet because they won't just take a shot to take a shot. It has to be the right shot. And they're not just going to injure an animal. They're going to, if they shoot it, they're going to shoot it. And they're going to shoot it and kill it and eat it. And with the Sasquatch, so it kind of goes against a lot of what hunters believe when they run into one of these things of just shooting it just for the hell of it. Now, they will tell you that if it's coming towards them, they'll blast it. They have no problem blasting it. But the few hunters I talked to while I was down in Texas, every one of them said if I saw one of those dogmen creatures again, I would shoot it, and I'd shoot to kill it and not even hesitate on it.
We do coyote hunting out here, and it's pretty much the same deal, I guess, as far as outlook on it. Yeah, I wouldn't take a pot shot at one of them, the Sasquatch, because they're out in the woods. That's their place. That's fine. But if the rascal's trying to hurt me or mine, then I'm going to light him up. But if I was to come across one of these dogman deals, from what I've been reading on, I don't think I'd hesitate twice about dropping that sucker. I've heard reports on coming out of southeastern Oklahoma down at Kiamishis, where these things have chased the hunters and killed deer and slaughtered livestock. I've never read a report or heard of a report where these things did not act aggressive.
Yeah. You never hear of anyone gifting with a dogman or feeding it apples or...
You might try it once, and you're the gift.
Yeah.
Well, for years I've been trying to tell folks, listen, enjoy the outdoors, but you gotta be smart about it because it's up to you to protect the people you're with, whether it's a group of scouts, whether it's your children, your spouse. You go out in them woods, you gotta be careful because these rascals are out there. Most of the time, they might just come along and curious and see what you got. Once everybody gets in the tents and all, they might poke around your camp. But then again, if you start taking pot shots at these things, you're going to have to get out of there because you're going to make them mad. And good God, if you shoot one of these things, you definitely better get in that vehicle and get out of the area, because that family group is going to come after you. There's no doubt about it. You just got to be safe. Go off in the woods where you can enjoy them. Go armed, ready to protect yourself. If there's a place where I am not allowed to go in there armed, then I'm not going to go camping there.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to protect yourself.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's like when I was telling you when we were in Texas, and the night that we were leaving one location, because we only had a permit to be in there for so long, but we were leaving one location, and all night long we were hearing vocals from every direction, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
And we were leaving, and the next day, Boy Scout troop was going to come in there and camp. And I remember thinking, man, should I say something to these kids? Should I pull the scoutmaster aside and say,
these folks need to realize if you do go armed, you better take the right stuff, because these things are massive. You've got to think in terms of, what do I have that can basically shoot through something about the width and thickness of a side-by-side refrigerator. These things are wide and they're thick. Your little 22s and things like that are not going to do anything that will really make them mad. So you got to carry something heavy enough to punch through that to keep yourself and your family members and friends safe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Do you, when the creatures pass through your property, have you ever tried to get a picture of one, or have you ever tried? I would imagine you kind of grew up with this, so it's interesting you said that. I got me a game cam here not too long ago, and I set that out. And that December when we was out there and found that first canine footprint, I had a trail cam set out, and I've got several pictures of deer right in front of it, and then there's one photo that I'll have to send you a copy of and see what you think about it, because what I'm thinking of, something come up behind that trail cam. I mean, these things know about those cameras. They know about, they can see the IR, there's no doubt about it. Infrared, they can see that. But I'm thinking this rascal come up there, and it looks like he's standing right beside that lens when it went off, because you can see 3 deer in the background just in a sheer panic going different directions, and you see this one shape on the left side of the frame. But I'll send that to you to see what you think about it. Yeah, I'd love to see it. And it's one of those things to where I realize a photo is not going to prove that these things are real. A photo is not going to.
Yeah, they're not going to do a thing. I mean, photos, videos, sound recordings. But once you see one, it is definitely a life-changing experience. I don't care whether people believe it or not. I'm damn near 63 years old, and these outfits are out there. You just need to know how to act around them when you're out in them woods.
Yeah, it's good advice. It's definitely good advice. Well, Bill, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I want to thank you. I know even with your profession, sometimes it's hard to come forward and talk, and I just can't thank you enough for coming forward. I think that it's something that'll eventually come out. I think what it's going to take is a body. It's kind of like the casino footage you and I were just talking about. You know, they would have released that, and 50% of the audience would have said it was a fake. The other 30% of trolls would have attacked it, and then there would have been a small percentage that would have said, hey, this looks real to me. And you're always going to have that, but I think once you have a body that comes out, or someone who's brave enough to bring one out, I think it's going to change the world, to be honest with you. I think it's going to shock the world, and it's going to be justification for all the people who said, hey, I saw this, and were either laughed at or called liars, or, were torn apart because of what they said they saw. I think it's going to be it's going to be justice for all of those people, to come back and go, see, I told you so.
Yep, you're definitely right there. You're definitely right. But I thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you my story about things that I've encountered and the family's encountered. And like I said, I've been listening to your show now for a while, and we just look forward to each new broadcast, because you're the real deal. You're putting out the right information, and it's educating people. That's what it's all about, is educating them. And you're giving us good information. And it'll keep people safe. If they just listen, pay attention to what you're saying and what your people on your show's telling, it'll keep them safe, and eventually this will get resolved as far as confirm whether they do exist or not. But it'll take a body being drug in. But good Lord, that's going to take a group of people to get that thing out of there, because you'll probably be dealing with the family members. I don't doubt that a bit.
Yeah, it's going to be the fight of a life to get one out.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, I appreciate it.
Okay, well, you're sure welcome. I appreciate it, and I'll get down to work, and then I'll start going through it. And if you want those photos, I'll sure email them to you, and just see what you think about them, and whatever you want to do with them, use them, send them, share them. You just feel free to, because if it helps with the cause, then that's a good deal. It's my pleasure.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Hope everyone's weekend's going great. Got a great show planned for everyone. Tonight I'm going to be speaking with Tim Sermons, and Tim's actually a researcher out there in Texas. He's right along there side by side with Bob Garrett. And Tim actually started out in the BFRO. He had an encounter prior to that, but he went to the BFRO, worked with them, and then decided to part ways, and now he's down in Texas. So he's got a lot of encounter stories that he's going to be sharing tonight. So everyone, I hope you're buckled in. It's going to be a great show. And I want to welcome Tim to the show.
Oh, well, thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
Can you talk about your encounter that you had when you were a child, kind of your first experience with running into a Sasquatch, and kind of walk us into what you're doing, and then tell us about your encounter?
It's probably around 11, I guess. We lived rurally about 10 miles out of town. We had 6 acres that backed up to Kisatchie National Forest. And for those of you that don't know Kisatchie National Forest, it is a national forest that basically takes 80% of the state right through the center all the way almost to Arkansas. And, I didn't really think much about Bigfoot. I've seen In Search Of, and, some of the Bigfoot books and stuff like that as a kid in school, and checking out books in the library about this thing, and, various other monsters and stories and things like that. Well, basically, I guess one night, I couldn't even tell you the day or time, really. I think it was probably spring. I woke up, well, I guess let me preface by saying that we had 6 acres. The house was an acre off the road, and then we only had a half acre for the backyard, and then the rest of the land was nothing but woods. And we didn't have a real close neighbor. The houses were a great deal apart. And like most country people, we had a street light, a big pole in the backyard that would illuminate. And it would outline my window. And we had those big, tall, skinny windows in the house. And I woke up one night with some sort of noise. And I'm laying there in bed, and I'm looking at the window, and I see this big, massive shadow walk past the window. Describe that shadow, it was as tall as the window. And it was just a walk right by. It had a forward head. Its head was like leaning forward, and it looked like it had messy hair. Like hair on your head, but it was like messy. And I'm sitting there as an 11-year-old kid. I'm like, who's in my yard? So I get out of bed, and I go around to the back porch, and I open the door, and I go outside, and I look. And as I'm looking, the street light is kind of in that area. So I'm looking off to my left at the corner of the fence there, and I see a big, massive person. So I thought, just step over the chain link fence like it was nothing and walk into the woods. I run back in the house. I go wake my dad up. He gets up. He walks up there and looks. He goes, "There's nobody out here, son. You're just dreaming. Go back to bed." So I went back to bed. But I went back the next morning, and I told my dad. He asked me about it, and I said, "Well, who do you think it was?" I said, "I don't think it was too big to be anybody. It was a big, big, big person or something. It had, this big, broad shoulders, and it just stepped across the chain link fence." And I said, "I think it was a Bigfoot." He said, "No, son, there's no such thing as Bigfoot." So anyway, I kind of just dropped it at that, and we never brought it up again. It was like several years before I even considered even thinking about Bigfoot.
So the thing walks across your yard and just steps over a chain link fence. I would imagine it's a tall chain link fence.
Well, yeah, probably chest high, so 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall, maybe. Chain link fence.
Wow, and it just stepped over.
Spikes on the end.
Yeah. Did you guys have any more incidences around the property?
No, not that I can remember. The only other time that I can think of anything very, very strange ever happening is we were popping fireworks. It was like New Year's or Christmas. It was one of those. It was during that time of year. We were popping fireworks at a bonfire in the backyard. My oldest brother was there, and my dad and my cousins, and we heard this horrible scream come out of the woods. And my oldest brother, just told me that was just a cat. Just don't worry about it, you know. And that's the only other thing that I could ever remember happening. Those two things, me having the fighting and then that vocalization that I heard that night.
Did you have any other incidences happen prior to joining the BFRO?
I really haven't. And I got interested in the BFRO. You know, I guess the one positive thing that I can say about Rick Dyer is when they pulled off that hoax, of course, it sparked my interest again, because I was one of the people that was thinking, oh crap, maybe these things really they do exist, you know. So I started searching online, and of course I found the BFRO, so then I got involved in that, and actually went on an expedition. I went to Missouri in 2008, I think, and had a blast up there. There were some interesting things that happened up there, and I just kind of caught the fever from there. Came back. I learned a lot from those guys, and I came back and I started looking at topo maps in my area. I started going exploring, and I go a lot by myself. Didn't know really what I was doing, but I just, you know, walk down this trail, that trail during the day, and just got around. Just everything would look like it was, you know, had a good potential to have activity from what I was learning. I then went on a second expedition. Nothing happened on that expedition. This was in Georgia. And then I went on another expedition to Oklahoma, which was very, very active. There were a lot of vocalizations and things like that were gotten from that area. After my third expedition, I actually became an investigator for the FRO and started being able to do reports. I did most of the reports. Well, for a time I did a lot of the reports from Mississippi, and I did some in Oklahoma, and I did some in Louisiana.
One of the things I wanted to have you go into for the show, I know you and I just talked about it, if you would kind of go into some of the strangest reports that you investigated, some of the odd ones. I know we had just talked about 3 of them. Can you tell the audience about some of the strange reports or some of the more memorable ones that you went and investigated?
You know, the way well, I guess I need to kind of tell you how their system does. People put in reports, and then it gets kind of filtered into whatever area you're signed up for. It's divided by state. So then you get a report that comes across in your state, and you go and you do a preliminary. You read what the person wrote, and then there's another section. It's kind of like a form that is pretty detailed, like GPS location, you know, time of day. It's pretty specific. So I started getting some of these reports in and reading them. Of course, you know, you get the bullcrap reports, you know. I saw Sasquatch on a unicorn running across the road, so you just have to dismiss that stuff. But then you run across the ones that you're like, well, let me call this guy, and or let me contact this guy and see if we can talk. And usually it's done by email initially. I guess one of the very memorable ones I did that had to do with a deer hunter. And the deer hunter, he is actually from Memphis and he hunted in Mississippi. And he had his own little private Idaho, if you will, on where he hunted deer. And if anybody knows anything about deer hunters, once they have their little honey hole, they don't want to share it, they're not going to give it up, and they're going to always hunt there. And this guy had just that. I mean, he said he's killed deer out of there that were, you know, 10 point, 12 point, score 150, you know, easily. Good deer. Well, he starts off by telling me that he had gone to his spot there, and it's down in the headwaters near the Tallahatchie River, and he puts a climbing stand in the day before. When he's walking in, he hears a wood knock, and he's like, that's interesting. And after he set his deer stand up, his climbing stand, he left and waited to come back the next morning. He got there just before daybreak, walked in there, got in his climbing stand, climbed up, and he's sitting there, and he goes, it's just about daylight, you know, and he starts seeing this big bush start moving about 200 yards away. And he's thinking, oh great, here's going to be my first deer. That's a deer over there making a rub. So he picks up his binoculars and he starts finding what he's looking at, and he sees what he first describes as a bear. And he's like, oh, That's a bear, a big black bear. But he said as he was looking, his binoculars fogged up. So he put those down and he went to his rifle scope. Well, he went to his rifle scope and he saw the whole side of the head. He saw the ear, the close-cropped ear. And he saw this big massive thing just squatted down on the ground. And it was doing something with the tree, making it move, and it was doing something on the ground. Well, he couldn't believe what he was seeing, so he stood up to get a better view with his rifle. When he did that, the stand must have made a little squeak or a noise or something. Well, the thing stopped doing what it was doing, stuck its nose in the air, and started turning its head. And then it turned around and looked at him. It stood up on two legs and ran, as he's facing it, to his left. And he was like, my God, what the hell did I just see? Now, you have to remember, when you're talking to these guys, this guy's voice was shaking. I mean, he was legitimately scared even retelling the story. And I know, Les, you said people will a lot of times do that when you start talking to them, especially on the radio show. And I've even heard it on your show where they get into it and it's almost like they're reliving it. It's almost like a PTSD kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. People relive.
That's exactly what this guy was like.
Yeah. And so he saw it actually run on two legs. It wasn't like it took off on four legs. This thing took off running on two legs.
Yeah, it stood up. And now you got to remember, it's 200 yards away. He's looking at it through a rifle scope. And the thing stands up and runs away on two legs. So I asked the guy, I'm like, what are you doing? What'd you do then? He goes, I sat down and I thought about it. And he goes, no, I'm not crazy. I know I'm not crazy. That was no bear. I'm not crazy. And I said, well, what'd you do then? He goes, I climbed down. I said, were you going to leave? He goes, nope. I was going to go over there and I had every intention of shooting this thing, every intention of killing it, because I wasn't going to be made a fool of and I didn't know what this thing was. I was going to kill it. So he walks the 200 yards over to where this thing was and he looks down and he sees a track where it had slid in the mud there as it ran off. He said it was the biggest track he'd ever seen. He could put both his feet inside the track. He started to go in the direction that it went and he heard another wood knock. And it came from the direction that this alleged creature went. But to his right, on the other side, he heard a whoop. And he said, I realized then that I was not alone. There was more than one. And as big as that thing was, I was not hanging around to see what that was. So I got out there. I tried to get that guy to meet me. I tried to get out there. He told me where the location was, so I had to go by myself to go check this place out. And it did not disappoint me at all. I'm not even sure I found the exact place he was talking about. Here you got a big bad deer hunter that's been out all his life, and he doesn't even hunt anymore. He will not go back to that spot. He wouldn't even meet me out there in the daytime just to even, go through the scene with him. Would not do it. So that was that was a very, very good report. We didn't actually talk about this one, but the other, I guess the deer hunting or the hunter stories are the ones that intrigue me the most. Because the deer hunters or the hunters are the ones that will give you the most crap about this, but they're also the ones that their reports are probably the most substantive.
I agree with you 100% because a deer hunter, or not even just your hunter in general, people talk about, because we've had police officers on the show, we've had doctors on the show, we've had judges on the show. For me, I love to hear from everyone, but my ears perk up really quick when it's a hunter. Because a hunter knows what they're looking at. They're not going to mistake it for something else. And they're out there all the time. And so, to me, it lends a lot of credibility when you get a report from a hunter.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, the next report I got is a hunter report as well. This was a woman, female hunter, and this is in southern Mississippi. I did not actually get the report, but I know it was done through BFRO. But it was one that, or maybe it may not have been through them, it may have been through another group. But it was a similar situation. This woman's in her deer stand, and she's on the edge of a green field, and she's sitting there watching this young doe. She wasn't going to kill the doe. She was just watching it. And she looked down to see a Bigfoot below her tree stand, crouched. And it stealthily moved to the edge of the green field, and the deer got a little bit closer. Well, this squatch leapt and grabbed that deer and put it in like a bear hug and killed it that way. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of that.
It had grabbed the deer and put it in a bear hug and killed it?
Yeah.
I've never heard that either.
Because you usually hear about them breaking the neck, breaking the leg, breaking the neck, that kind of thing. But yeah, this one did that. And most interesting thing is what it did is it picked it up under its arm like a sack of groceries, walked back to where the woman was in her deer stand, went behind her into the brush, and threw it down in where she could begin to hear it eat this deer. And she did not come out of the stand for several hours. They actually had to come get her. The people she was with had to come get her and get her down. Pretty horrific deer hunting story right there.
Yeah, talk about PTSD.
Yeah, of course, there's the famous one in Texas with the hog hunter. That was probably one of the first ones that got me interested when I started researching Bigfoot. I was reading the database on all these different, groups, websites and stuff, and I ran across that one. That was pretty cool. It was very similar, but it brings you to commonalities.
The encounter you're just talking about, was that the one where the hunter was in his deer stand and he saw it pick up hogs and smash it against trees and then eat them?
Yeah, well, yeah, I carried it off, yeah. That's the one I was talking about. The interesting thing is, you take that report, you take the one of the first one that I said, and then you take this and you look at the commonalities. What was the creature doing? Well, in two of those incidents, the creature was actually hunting. The other one, I don't know what he was doing, the very first one. He was just over there, I guess, digging in the mud. I don't know. But so now you got, out of those three reports, you got two commonalities. So that shows you that, yes, these things do hunt. That's kind of how I've taken what I've learned from doing reports. And I was taught by that by, somebody that has done a lot of reports and kind of steered me that direction. If you can, basically the rule of thumb to do when you're doing any report is if you can explain it by any normal means, then you have to explain it that way. It's when you can't explain it, you got the mystery, and then you got what we're looking for. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I understand completely. You want to rule everything out first. I mean, you don't want to go straight to it being, hey, I saw Bigfoot, or hey, I saw Sasquatch. It's interesting. A lot of people I've spoken to, and I'm sure you ran across this, Tim, when you were talking with people. Most people won't really come out and say, hey, I saw Bigfoot, or hey, I saw Sasquatch. They'll usually refer to it as a monster, or they'll say, I saw this, I don't know really what it is. Those are the ones that really fascinate me because they're describing a Sasquatch, but they don't assign it that title because they've never seen it before. They don't know really what they're looking at. They think they have an idea, it's probably this, but a lot of people I think are looking for confirmation of what did I see? Tell me I'm not crazy and what did I see? You had a report you're telling me about where a guy saw one in his backyard. And it was kind of interesting because no one had lived in that house. Do you want to talk about that report?
Yeah, this is another one out of Mississippi. It's northern Mississippi. And he lived out rurally, and he was a long-haul truck driver. So he wasn't home a lot. And it was his uncle's house. He was a musician that traveled around and whatnot. And then when his uncle died or whatever, he just took the place over. He bought the place, took it over. But it had been empty for like 5 years. And again, it backs up to a lot of property. And so actually, I think it actually backs up to a natural preserve or a national preserve or something like that, wildlife refuge or something. This guy didn't think anything about Bigfoot or Sasquatch or anything like that. And he worked all kinds of crazy hours, so he was up at any time he could possibly be up. He has had several encounters when he submitted the report at the time. And the very first one, he was out on his back porch, and he had a shed right over by the wood. And he was actually on his back porch, relieving himself off the back porch. He noticed that there was a big man, a huge man crouched over by his porch. And what I didn't tell you earlier was his neighbor had said that he saw some guy around his house the other night, and he wanted him to be aware about it. He thought maybe a prowler or something was around. So he's out there, and he sees this big, huge man, all in black. All black. He thought he was wearing a black jumpsuit crouched down, looking at him. So he yells at the guy, hey, what are you doing over there? Well, this thing just rises up, just stands up, doesn't use its arms, just rises up from a crouched position, looks at him, and it's just massive. It's taller than the shed. Turns and runs and goes into the woods. Another detail I didn't tell you about this is back there was like a little, not an irrigation ditch, but some sort of runoff ditch that's back there that's probably about 20 feet. This thing jumped across that as it was going into the woods. He just jumped right across it.
That pretty much rules out I think standing higher than the shed is probably rules out a man anyway, but now this house, no one had lived in this house for a while, right? I mean, it was like 5 years.
That's right, 5 years. So he had to come in, he was fixing it up, cleaning it up, working on it, whatnot, stuff like that.
Didn't the people prior that lived there think the house was haunted? And why did they think the house was haunted?
He did mention that when I interviewed him too. And it was just because the house would get like slapped or, you'd hear banging on the door or this or that, just other stuff. And, that alone, you can't just say that that's a Bigfoot or that's Squatch. So I could see where they would have said that. But him having the sighting and everything, that kind of makes you raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, I think it adds to it. I mean, it's kind of like the people I was telling you about down in Texas that, when they first moved in, they thought the place was haunted. And I asked them, why do you think the house was haunted? She said, at night the house would get slapped or there'd be rocks thrown at the house. It sounded like rocks hitting the house. She goes, we just kind of thought the place was haunted until we saw this thing running back into the forest. But the encounter you were just telling me reminds me of, and I have it in the intro, it's a 911 call, where the guy calls 911, it's in his backyard, and he's saying it's all black and it's huge, and it's the same type of, what I thought was interesting about the encounter though is how it stood up. It didn't use its hands, it just went from a crouched position to all of a sudden now it's standing up.
Well, and that's one of the things when I said when you do these reports you have to find those commonalities. I've heard that often. That they don't have to use their arms to stand up. They just go from a crouch to standing just in one fluid motion. So that's one of the commonalities you can put in there. And that's kind of how I like to take, I'm not with BFR anymore, so I've taken a lot that I've learned from them. And I'm very friendly with a lot of other groups. The GCBRO, Mid America, Texla. I've got a lot of good friends in all those groups. So I do research with them from time to time, including I still do a little bit with BFRO when they're around and things like that. But that's the way I've taken my research, is that you have to look for those common things that are in all reports that are legitimate. You have to be able to pick those out, and it just takes time and experience to see what you're looking for and things like that.
Well, and I'm kind of curious, and I want you to talk about, you went out with the BFRO on an expedition with them, and I know you try and help, you still have friends in the BFRO, and, the BFRO, I think, has some good researchers in that group. I think what gets lost sometimes, and I know it's gotten lost on the show, you can't place everyone in the BFRO as you can't think moneymaker, or if you have a dislike for moneymaker for whatever reason. You can't then assign everyone in the BFRO as moneymaker, because there are some good people in the BFRO. I know, like Jim Sherman is one. I love the guys. The sound he puts together, the sounds he is able to capture, reminds me of what you guys do down there in Texas. He just does a great job at capturing sound. But you went out with these guys, and you want to talk about the bridge incident?
Yeah, I can actually. They did 2 expeditions down here. I'm not going to talk about the first one. I'll talk about the second one. It was probably early fall. The organizers asked me about areas. Well, first off, I got to talk about Texas in general. When you talk about Texas and you talk about being in the Southwest, as you know, because you've been here, there are other things besides Sasquatch in the woods that you have to worry about. There are snakes,
everything,
hogs.
Like everything. Even the rabbits look at you down there.
Even the rats. Rats. I mean, we just put the fleers out, and you should have seen the size of this wood rat. It attacked the doggone fleer that we had out in the woods. I was like, you got to be kidding me. It was huge. You thought it was a possum, but it wasn't. It was a dang wood rat.
Jesus. I know you guys were talking about I was thinking about coming back down in May or June, and all the stuff that will kill you is out and about then. I'm not sure if I'm man enough to come down there and, I can't be like Bob. He's been bitten, 11, 12 times. I think one bite would be enough for me from a snake.
Yeah, he got a 12th bite last summer actually from a canebrake rattlesnake. And the funny thing is he was actually wearing snake boots. And the snake went through his snake boots. They were older snake boots, I'm sure. They were probably about 6 years old. The Kevlar had broken down. What did save him on that was, the fang actually just scratched him. So he didn't get a full envenomation, like a full bite. And that probably kept him out of the hospital, but it swelled up. So yeah, you do have to worry about that stuff. So.
But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
This particular area, and with them being BFR on an expedition, I'm not going to give them up between those spots, but I will help them with areas that they'll at least be able to have experiences. So they came down, I went out, me and Bob Garrett went out with them a little bit and showed them, you have this trail, you have this trail, you have this trail, and you have this trail. These are all good trails. You can go down them. You can have experiences, but you need to watch out for hogs, you need to watch out for snakes, and you need to watch out for coyotes and things like that, There was one particular trail, and we call it the bridge. For the very first night, there were 14 people. They decided they wanted to go in one group and go down the trail. We did not want to give this trail up, mainly because there is a lot of activity on that trail, and we're actually researching that trail. But we knew they would not get any vocalizations, and the thought process was behind, we're going in there with 14 people, they're not going to get any vocalizations. But they might have a 50-50 shot at actually seeing something. But with 14 people, you're thinking, no, there ain't no way in heck you're ever going to see anything. And the trail's wide. So it was the very first night. I'm like, all right, fine, we'll go down there. We got to walk about a half a mile in to where we're going. So we get there. You got 14 people standing along this trail, and some of us are on this bridge. And we're all standing around. There's 3 people with FLIRs. Now, only one of those FLIRs were recordable. So we're, basically sitting around there, looking. And then the organizer looks at me and says, well, why don't you do a call, and see what happens? I said, okay, well, we really normally don't do calls out here, but okay, I don't mind doing that just to see what happens. So I let off and then, nothing happened. So I'm standing there looking around, and the organizer's got his FLIR up, and he's looking, and all of a sudden he says, contact. And I said, what? He says, I got contact. He goes, holy crap. There's 2. And he's never seen a Bigfoot before at all, and he's actually looking at 2 of them through the FLIR. He's like, holy crap, holy crap, holy crap. And then the other guy next to me on my right, he has a FLIR, and he's looking, he goes, holy crap, I saw him too. They're sitting there watching these 2 things. I said, hey Mike, let me borrow your FLIR for 1 second, I just want to clarify what you're looking at. And he's like, oh, okay, here. So I look, and I'm looking at 2 Sasquatches. One of them's behind the tree, and he leans out and squats down, looks back up, goes behind the tree, and I said, yeah, you're looking at 2 Sasquatches. Here you go, Mike, and I gave him the FLIR back. As they're watching them, Mark, who's on the other side, says, hey, one of them's coming around behind us. And the guy with the third FLIR, I said, Gabe, go ahead and turn around and with your FLIR and look and see if anything's behind us. Because what that thing was doing, he's actually flanking us and going to come around behind us. And that's because that's some of the behavior that I've seen that they do down here in our own research. Well, you got 14 people up there. The 3 guys with the FLIR were so ecstatic and so excited about sitting here looking at these things that they never bothered to show anybody else. But and then I only saw it for about, 8 seconds just to verify that they were looking at, because I wanted to make sure it was without a doubt what they were looking at. I got a little nervous when they came around behind us, and I said, we can't. And I have a very good reason for doing what I'm about to tell y'all. So most people are like, well, why'd you leave? Well, there's a reason why I left, and I'm probably not going to get into that. I asked everybody, so we just need to get out of here. It's not safe. And we walked on out of the trail. But that night was very special. And I do remember one guy in that whole group said, what about that behavior is aggressive? And I just looked at him and I said, dude, really? I said, you got 14 people out here and you got 2 Sasquatches that did not care that you were there, and they were coming closer and coming around behind us, and there's still 14 people out there. You tell me that's just normal behavior. from all the reports and everything, you tell me that's normal behavior, or is that not aggressive? He just looked at me.
It's an ambush, almost like they're setting up. You know, they're not going to, a normal animal isn't going to surround you like that unless it has bad intent. A cougar is not going to stalk you in the woods unless it has intent on getting you. It's just not following along like a pussycat. It has bad intent on getting you. And you might agree with me on this, and you can tell me your theory on it, but them coming in closer, not caring that you guys are seeing them, and then one that directly goes to the rear of where you guys are at, tells me that, you know, they're cornering you guys and trying to get you guys into a corner. That's pretty ballsy for 14 people, man.
It is very ballsy for 14 people, but like I said, the Squatches in this area seem like they're retarded. And maybe I shouldn't use that word. They're special. They're not, they are.
No, I get you.
They're very aggressive in that area.
Yeah. Did everyone kind of disagree with you on wanting to leave?
Oh, no. Actually, there were some women that were demanding to leave. I mean, some wanted to stay, and that's fine and everything, but I just couldn't be with, I could not have people out there knowing what I know and then, and having this, I would feel responsible for 14 people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you want to leave the meat wagon thing out, or do you want to talk about that?
We can, well, I can touch on it. The reason that I say these things are aggressive is because from time to time, you can see the sheriff's department in the corner there pulling body parts out of that particular area. So that's another reason why, that was another reason to leave. I had known that going in, but I never said anything to them about that. Little did I know, the 50-50 shot became 100% shot of seeing something with 14 people going down that trail.
I would say one of the biggest things, and this really isn't something that I've talked about so far, is when I was down there in Texas, you know, the maps that Bob has put together, you guys have put together, are pretty extensive maps. But what's interesting is when you overlay the map with encounters or sightings with missing people, I remember looking at the map, and I'm sitting there looking at this map of sightings, and I'm looking at different sightings, you know, where people have seen them, where Bob's seen them, where you guys have seen them in these other areas. And then you overlay it with the missing people that have been reported. It's pretty disturbing to see it, because where there's missing people, there's hotbeds of sightings in the same area that there's missing people. And so it's not hard to put two and two together on what's happening to people, especially when you have information like that. You know, so I can understand why you'd want to leave the area, you know, knowing what you knew of that area, especially, you know, if something went bad. I know you're the type of guy, Tim, you would have felt responsible for something going bad. Now, when you guys were out, there was an encounter that you, Bob, and Bob's son had. One had actually charged you guys. Do you want to talk about that night?
Yeah, but but before I talk about it, I want to clarify something to everybody. And it's a bit of a controversial, and I'm not a controversy, and I'm not going to elaborate at all. And I'm saying this for the record. I was not even in this area whenever there was a film that was put out about a camp that had been demolished. I wasn't in any part of that original, I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, you weren't there at the torn up camp.
But the sighting that you're talking about and the experience that you're talking about happened at that location. And we had gone down there. We had been at a completely different other area. We had cleared, and we were, you know, doing our thing and listening for sounds and had recordings. I remember it was very cold. So we left that area and we drove down there because they wanted to show me the site. And I wanted to see the site, you know. I mean, who wouldn't want to see the site? To kind of give you a perspective of what it's like to go down there. All right, so you're going 6 miles down a dirt road, and then you go another 5, you take a turn, and you go another 5 miles. And then you take a fork, and you go another 8 or 9 miles, and then the road ends. Well, that's the location that we're talking about. We get out of the vehicles and, I'm getting the, tour, the grand tour. Well, this is where this was. This is where that was. This is this. And I'm sitting there looking at this area, and you want to talk about a spooky place anyway. It's just spooky as hell. If you've ever, I just wish people could know where it was, and I'm not going to tell them, but I mean, I'm just going to tell you.
It's a very
spooky place.
It's a very, very lonely drive there. And it's a very, very lonely spot, and it's spooky during the day. I can't even imagine what it's like at night. During the day, you get a vibe from that area, that's for sure.
Oh, without a doubt. So we're looking around and everything, and we get further in, and we hear a wood knock. And I stop and I look at the guys, and I'm like, you hear that? They shake their head, yeah. We just kept on going. As we keep going, we get up to where there's a big tree, and there was another tree that was broken, basically leaning across it. All of a sudden, and it's like a dang elephant coming running through the brush, tree snapping and everything else, and you can hear the footsteps and everything. Well, the three of us backed up probably a matter of 40 feet in a matter of seconds, and I don't know how we did it. And Bob put the spotlight up. It was actually a green laser. And I think that's the only reason why the thing stopped. Because it stopped right there at that tree, probably about 10 feet away from us. We're all three looking at it, and it's like, and it turns around and walks back into the woods. Very, 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 very frightening. It was probably one of the scariest times that I've had. But what you don't know is we went back the next day. We went back the next day and started looking around in the daylight, and we found 12 to 13-inch tracks by the tree, and then we found 18-inch tracks. So the theory that we kind of came based on the tracks was there must have been a smaller one there, and Mommy or Daddy was somewhere else or close by. We come walking in, and it hits the tree and calls for help, and then we get charged. And that's our theory on what happened, basically. Another thing that people don't realize, too, about this particular area, when you drive your vehicle down there, and this was a mistake, and I don't ever do this mistake again. I drove down there straight on. There's not a good place to really turn around. Now if I go down there, I go in, and I pull in, and I back out and turn around so my car's pointed out, because there's only one way to go in and one way to go out.
Yeah, especially there.
That night. So yeah. We didn't do it that night, but from now on, I mean, ever since then, we go down there, we turn the vehicles around.
Let me ask you, do you think it was just bluff chart? Like a lot of different primates will do, like gorillas are notorious for it. Do you think it was bluff charging you guys, or do you think you were just moments away from being ripped apart and the laser stopped it?
I don't know. I like to think that we were bluff charged, but I really don't have an answer to it. I'm just glad it stopped. There's no telling. I don't know what its intention was, to be honest.
At any point, did you guys think, shoot it?
Oh, yeah. Bob was like, get the gun, Travis, get the gun, get the gun. It was a 45 caliber pistol, and that's another reason, by the way, I carry now. I would never carry before. But because of that incident, I always have a gun with me. Bob actually had a gun. Travis had a gun there that night, but it was in the truck. Now it's always on our person somewhere.
In your encounters, or times that you've encountered these things and a lot of the reports that you've taken, do you think that the chances of coming across these are better at night? Or do you think it's more during the day, or do you think it's kind of irrelevant?
Honestly, I think it's kind of irrelevant. But you have to understand, though, I had this sighting when I was 12. I didn't see another one, really. Not one that I can say for sure that I saw one until I got to Texas. People say that you're not going to see them in the rain. Okay, whatever. The best sighting I had here was in the rain. The vocalizations, all the best vocalizations I've gotten have been in the rain. Now, it wasn't a downpour thunderstorm, but it was raining. People see them in the daytime. People see them in the night. They see them in the morning. They see them midday. It doesn't matter. I think you're probably more apt to see them at dawn and dusk, just like you do any other animal. But I think encountering them at night is probably, your odds is just as good at night as they are any other time. Day just as good. I mean, we've got just as many daytime sighting reports as we do nighttime sighting reports.
I think the other thing too, a lot of people who are listening may not quite understand why someone like yourself or myself or other people who've had encounters go out looking for them, because they'll think, what is the end goal? And I know, like in your guys' case, you guys have them on thermals, and you guys have videos of them. You guys have hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of audio, some of the best audio out there. Do you ever get to the point where you're tired of getting audio, you're tired of watching them on flares, and you just kind of want to go out and prove it? You just kind of want to go out and prove it to the world?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you do, because we were to the point, I mean, just like the point of, on the bridge, when I took the flare and looked at them, I mean, I didn't know it was amazing that I sat there and said that, yeah, you're looking at two squatches, and gave the flare back to them. We go out there and we hear 2 or 3 wood knocks and we're disappointed, I mean, Leslie, when you were out there, we were like, how many times did we apologize to you, or did Bob apologize? I'm sorry, it's not as active as it normally is.
Yeah.
And it's during a monsoon, wasn't it?
Yeah, all of you guys were very apologetic, which made me laugh because there was so much activity out there. I was just blown away by it, the constant vocals. And yeah, I will say there's not a lot that shakes your guys' group up, that's for sure. You guys have definitely been battle tested. I will say that.
Well, that's the other thing too. When I got here, I realized I didn't know anything, and I'm not saying I do now, because I really don't. But what I do know is you have to get out, and you have to put the hours in, and you have to go where they are. And I had a good friend of mine tell me, he goes, how can anybody, he went to some festival, and he's like, all these big name people are out there, and they're just sitting at a public campground going, oh, listen to that, listen to that. And he said, I wanted to go out down the trail. And they're like, you're crazy if you want to go down there. And this is a guy from Mississippi. It was a friend of mine, and he goes out by himself. And I tell him he's a little nuts now for going out by himself. But there, it's a little bit different. You don't hear of them being quite as aggressive in Mississippi as you do here either. It's you do get tired of hearing locals, and you do get tired of. You always want something more and more, I guess, is what I guess I'm trying to say. You always want to get more evidence, better evidence. You want to talk about track casts. I mean, we've gotten track casts. I mean, when you were here, Wes, I mean, we had a track. I remember you were like, well, show me where the track is. So, well, why don't you wait until it comes up and we'll pull it up and we'll look at it together, Yeah. But that track cast didn't come to fruition because of the doggone monsoon that we had,
Yeah.
So it never set right and everything, but that was a whole trackway right there.
Let me ask you, when you were with the BFRO, and I'm sure you've heard stories, I don't know if you actually handled any encounters like this, but I know you've heard these same type of stories, Tim. When they seem to focus on a property, I've had several lately that people contact me. It's mainly down south, and they'll tell me about what's going on the property, and it's the same story over and over and over again. And what's interesting is none of these people know each other. Most of them aren't really into Bigfoot, but they'll describe the same type of behavior over and over and over again, like the house being slapped, coming and turning the doorknob like it's trying to get in, peeking in the windows. Do you think that's curiosity, or do you think that there's something more sinister going on? I'll give you an example. I know I was looking to have Bobby Hamilton on this last week, where he had one motioning for him to come to the window. And I know you know of the cowman story, but where they're actually coming up and focusing on a house, what do you think the intent there is?
Like I said, you got to look at commonalities. In these incidences, who's home at the time? Is there a male at the house? Is it females? Is it small children? Or is it children? What I have found, and it's a habituation site, it's the common phrase. One that I worked it was a couple, but the husband worked offshore and was not there but 2 weeks out of the month. During the 2 weeks that he was gone, the activity would increase. But when he was there, it would decrease substantially. So I guess you got to kind of ask yourself that question. what's going on in the house or who's at the house to draw their interest. An alpha male is not going to challenge an alpha male unless he thinks he can win.
So you think it's more of kind of sinister behavior going on when they tend to come up to people's homes?
I wouldn't say that for sure, but I would say that I think some of it is sinister, and I think, but then you get the, I know there's people that talk about the Erickson Project and things like that. But you know what? If you look at that, it was the woman that had most of the activity. I mean, she'd go out, you've seen probably the pancake footage, and she was out feeding them. That's another reason for habituation, is if you feed them, because I know that there are stories on some of the First Nation people of, today, even though on the reservations that they're feeding them, and then when they quit feeding them, bad things tend to happen. So you have to look at that.
Being in the BFRO, did you ever get a chance to look at the famous pancake footage that everyone talks about?
I did. It's been several years since I've seen it, so I have to think back a little bit, but the best I can tell is there was I don't know if it was a stump or what it was exactly, or if it was a table they put out there, but it was actually in the woods. It was a little trail that went into the woods behind this property. And she would take pancakes, or she would take things and put them out there. And then apparently they would give them equipment, the people there, some equipment to video. So they had like a deer stand, camouflage, that kind of stuff, and they put up there, and that's how they got that footage. But I don't, from what I can tell, it's like anything else. It wasn't exactly the best footage out there.
What's the one Sean was talking about? He was telling me about one, and I don't know if you saw it or not. It's when we were out there in Texas. It may not have been the pancake footage, but he was telling me about some of the Erickson footage that he was privy to from being in the BFRO. And he said one of the videos he looked at, he said that it was pretty close from about the chest up of this creature. It's reaching down, it's eating. And I asked him, so what did it look like? And he said it was probably the ugliest thing he's ever seen. He said it had canines. It had a black tongue. He said it had a black mouth. He thought it was female. And he said it's not what you would picture a Bigfoot looking like. He said it was just the ugliest thing he's ever seen in his life.
I did not see that footage. I've seen the one where they come out. There was a couple that were circulated through when you were in there that they kind of showed if you were on an expedition and stuff, but it was, the one I saw, they came out of the woods, two of them did, and were walking along the fence line, and then they went back in the woods, and that was, but he's right. I mean, actually the particular fellow that, did a lot of the research for that project and everything said that, he said they're just pathetic looking. It's like they've had a hard life. But that's that group up there. In Kentucky, but that they're very pathetic looking. They're not what you think. These don't particularly look like Patty. Prior to now, before, I thought that they were all black. They all looked like Patty, the same body style, and then I've learned differently here. So now, and then through, even some of your podcasts with your witnesses and things like that, the Patty style tend to be more in the Pacific Northwest than some of the northern areas, but not to say that we don't have them here, because yes, they have been seen in Texas, Louisiana, and whatnot. But you also see another, I hate to say another kind, because I really think they're kind of the same, but they're just a little bit different. And I think that's probably an example of finding a little bit different ones, in that Kentucky footage. That's, I guess, my opinion on that part, anyway.
What are some of the descriptions that you hear that are different from, say, the Patterson-Gimlin film?
Okay, the Patterson-Gimlin film, the conical head is always a common thing that you see when they discuss it with the black ones. The big, huge, muscular bodies, almost like, if you think about Patty, she looks like a big football player, with breasts. That's the kind of the body style, the big lumbering, but they don't really lumber when they walk, they glide. But, they have that big body like that. The ones down here, you will see that from time to time, but those sightings here are much rarer than this other kind. I'll give you an example of the first sighting that I had in Texas. We were camped, there were like 7 or 8 of us, and we were camped exactly where you were camped here. Sean saw us, Larry saw us, Sean's dad, myself, Glenn, Bob Triskowski, several of the guys were there, and it was raining. And we were actually we were going to call it quits. Then you had 4 trucks. There was 1 truck already parked, and you had 4 trucks come in a circular area, and one backed in, one pulled around, and then I parked over by the tree line. And we got out, and everybody got out pretty much, park, jump out, get out, start moving around. You got 8 guys over there. Well, Larry had his headlight on, and he had his door open to his car with the dome light. And he's in there messing with something in his truck or whatever. So the dome light illuminated behind him along with his headlight that he had on. And Sean was at the other truck, and I was probably about 15 feet, maybe 10 feet away from Larry, looking in his direction. We're sitting there, we're having a conversation actually about if we're going to leave or not because of the weather. And then about that time, here's the commonality again. What just rose up from the ground was the squatch, and I knew exactly when I saw it what it was. But it stood up. It had its right arm bent 90 degrees at the elbow, and it had its wrist bent 90 degrees with its fingers down. And it had these big, massive shoulders, and it had a little round head. And then these shoulders kind of keyed down into a skinnier waist, and I could see it in my mind's eye right now with that arm bent, this long, shaggy hair hanging off the arms. It's 8 feet behind Larry, and he never knew it was there. And by the time I said, get the FLIR, there's a squatch, and I said it just like that, get the FLIR, there's a squatch right now. It had run, 30 yards into the tree line. And Sean got the FLIR, and he's looking, and I didn't move. I sat there, me and Glenn, we were looking at it. He had his back to it, and I was looking, and I said, hey, Sean, do you have a hit on the FLIR? And he didn't say anything. And I said, Sean, do you have and I fully expected him to say, no, I don't see anything. I said, Sean, do you have a hit on the FLIR? And he said, yeah, I've got it. Do you know that everybody saw that thing through the FLIR that night? Everybody. It had went over to there, and it laid down on the ground, and it kept pushing up and raising its head, looking up. You could see it. The most people saw it was from about the waist up as it would push itself up and look, and the movement of it was so weird, just the speed of it. But that was most definitely not a patty style Bigfoot, patty style squatch. It was most definitely this other kind that we encounter down here. But that's not to say that the patty style and this style don't hang out together, because, we've got a video of a patty style black one and one of these other ones in the same footage. One's standing up and goes from the middle of the screen to the left when you're looking at the video. The other one comes up from the right side and runs straight at the guy that's walking in front, and then it veers off and goes to the right, out of frame. It's an amazing piece of footage, actually.
I don't think a lot of people understand why guys like you don't release footage. And, it's anytime you release anything, it gets so torn apart. It's kind of like the Bigfoot community loves to eat their own. You know what I mean, so to speak. They love to eat their own. They cannibalize on their own. And it's kind of a shame too, because a lot of this footage, I think if there was a lot less attacks on people in the community and outside of the community, I think more footage would come forward. I think a lot more people would be willing to share. It's so hard now even to get people to say, hey, I saw this, or hey, I came across this. People who have real footage don't want to bring it forward, and I can kind of see why.
Yeah, we have footage. We have FLIR. We put some out there, and people, it is, the funny thing is, Wes, like I said, you've been down here, so you know. And this was filmed in the summertime, believe it or not. All right. We had a piece of footage. We were actually up around the campfire and set a FLIR back. Now, it's not the best footage, which is why we put it out. You know what I mean? But it's a squatch, and it comes running up the hill, and it's throwing crap at us. When we put that out there, just a little bit of that footage out there, we've had everything from people saying that I'm running up and down the hill naked. Okay, really? Not there, and not in July, and there ain't no freaking way. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And you're right. You're absolutely right. We cannibalize our own in this community. the people that typically are the hoaxers, I mean, you figure them out pretty quick. You know, the Rick Dyers out there and everything like that. And hey, you know, I can't fault Rick Dyer for being a hoaxer. He's a hoaxer, you know? He fully admits it. You know? Oh, he is what he is. So he puts anything out, well, you already know. But, you know, when you get this person or that person putting out a piece of video, everybody wants to take it. They want to break it down. They want to do this when that may not even been the focus of the whole video to begin with. It bothers me that some of the videos that I've been with Bob Garrett on and we filmed and, somebody takes it and breaks it down. And like, I'll tell you right now, that 3 Mile In video, I'll talk about that because it just aggravates the freaking crap out of me. The 3 Mile In video that we did.
Yeah, explain the video for the audience, you know, because as if they had never seen it. Explain what's in the video and then kind of go into your frustration.
Okay. Anytime we go out, we take a video camera and we like to document. We like to video document just what we're doing. It doesn't matter if we even get anything. We just want to document it. And we kind of want to teach people and show people, this was our original idea. We wanted to teach people and show people what we did and how we did it. Now, obviously, the camera's not on the entire time because you have about 45 minutes to 2 hours of just us walking in. Because, you know, we just walk in, you know, 2-3 miles sometimes, 4 miles sometimes. We don't go where people go. We go other places. We went to this one place and Bob videoed as we went in periodically, you know, this piece, whatever. We're just showing the area and showing what to look for. And every once in a while you might get lucky and you might get something. You know what I mean? That's not what we're doing it for. We like to show people that we're setting up clears and how we're doing it and how we're doing our research. On the 3 Mile In video, we went in there. We're walking around. Bob is filming, just filming everything. And, you know, and he'll see some interesting things and he'll zoom in and stuff like that. Well, I remember when he put it out, the original first one, when he put it out, people started saying, oh, I see something at this time frame or that time frame. Well, I'm going to tell you honestly, I didn't see nothing when I was out there and I didn't see anything in the video. Then next thing I know, oh, there's this cloaking Bigfoot in the film. I'm like, really? Okay, whatever. So anyway, this particular person, he takes it and he does a breakdown. Now he did a pretty interesting breakdown of it and I looked at it and whatever and, you know, great, whatever. But what he's actually showing you that, and he doesn't, I don't think he even passes judgment on it, the cloaking, when he just poses the question out there, is this an entity or a cloaking Bigfoot? You know, stealth Bigfoot or entity, I think is the name of the footage or whatever. Well, you know, none of us saw anything. Bob zoomed in because he saw some movement, that was it. That was about the extent of that. If you look at the rest of the whole video, all we do is go up there and we look at the trail that we're on and we look at this and we set the clears. And that's pretty much the video and we leave. We set the clears, set them up and we leave. And that's the whole purpose of doing our videos. But they found this. Now granted, I'm not going to argue that there wasn't something there. There may very well could be. What it was, I have no idea. But I'll tell you, it wasn't no damn cloaking Bigfoot. What I can tell you is the sun was at that setting stage, but it was still sunny. And the sun was facing towards the camera. And the autofocus on that camera, when you zoom in, the autofocus, it takes this it has to find something to make its focus on. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you have something moving there, you're going to get that distortion or that shimmer, and I think that's what everybody's saying. You got the freaking cloaking Bigfoot. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think you got a case of the autofocus with the camera with the sunlight on that particular model of camera. Now, I've looked at it. Do I think something was there? I think something was probably there. What it is, I cannot tell you. But I can tell you, everybody said, well, yeah, it runs from left to right. No, it doesn't. Because if it ran from left to right, there is no way in hell I wouldn't have seen it, Bob wouldn't have seen it, and Travis wouldn't have seen it. Because of the area we were in. You don't get that from the video. All it pretty much did was probably take a step or two, and then it ran straight back. And when you look at the video, there's some more pond fronds moving further back as it goes further deeper into the woods. So it's running away from us, whatever it is. It could have been a deer. I don't know. I didn't see it. But it wasn't no doggone cloaking Bigfoot. And that's for the record.
Yeah, it's one of those things,
so that's the kind of thing that I think aggravates me. You know, you're going to take somebody else's work and then you're going to put your own conjecture and everything into it, and make your own anecdotal evidence and try to make it this and try to make it that. And a lot of times, some of the people with what we put out there and what we've done, they use the liar, pants on fire, freaking offensive. I'm like, really?
And, we don't have to get too much into the Bigfoot community, but I think the biggest problem that I've seen, and I've always seen this, and that's why, when the whole thing happened, with me and people questioning my encounter, a lot of people might be shocked to know it bothered me, but it didn't bother me that much in the sense that the Bigfoot community is crazy, man. All these other shows, all these other quote unquote researchers, and I won't say everyone, but most of your researchers out there, they're so desperate to be the guy. They're so desperate to, and it's kind of sad, really. It's kind of sad that is the focus of their life, that they try so desperately. It's like everyone thinks we're curing cancer here, and we're not. We're trying to solve a mystery, but we're not curing cancer here. And there's just this ego and all the, so they take something that you guys have done, spin it, and say there's a cloaking Bigfoot. Well, why do that? What is the motive behind that? What is the, cause like you said, I mean, it could be lights, it could be all different sorts of things that cause that to give it kind of a weird appearance. You know what I mean?
That's absolutely what happens. I think, what's the term? Pareidolia?
Yeah, pareidolia.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, I think that happens a lot. I mean, and I think that's a trap that some people get into. And you originally asked me why I don't post anything. I don't post anything for a bunch of reasons. Number one, if you're interested and you want to see stuff, then get out there and do it yourself. Number one, I do it for my own stuff, and I'll share with. I'm a very sharing person with what I've gotten, but doggone it, you got to know me, as you probably know, and I'm more than happy to send you a recording I've gotten or anything like that. But I'm not going to post it somewhere just to put my research out there to say, hey, look at me, look what I got. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not going to put out my videos. I'm not going to put out any FLIR that I've gotten. I'm not going to do it. Because number one, I don't need the aggravation of everybody thinking they know what they don't. I'm not going to play into those games with people like that. Honestly, I just want to do my thing, and I get what I get, and you don't see it, I'm sorry. Go with me.
Isn't it kind of a weird community, though? Isn't it kind of, everyone wants to solve this, and I don't think that it necessarily, I've heard people say everyone's trying to be the guy to solve it. I don't think that's it. I think a lot of these different researchers, they want to be the go-to guy. They want to be the quote-unquote expert. They want to be, and I hate to break it to everyone, no one's an expert. No one knows, no one has the answers we all theorize through our experiences. We all go through and give our opinions based on what we've experienced. But it's just frustrating, man, because it's just such a weird community. And it's not even a community I ever really wanted to be involved with in the first place. I think I've said that from day one in the show. But for some reason, you become part of this weird community. The Bigfoot community is like the uncle you never invite to Thanksgiving because he gets drunk and he makes an ass out of himself. That's the Bigfoot community. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't blame you guys for not sharing. I realize there's clicks and everything, and you guys really are the real deal. I mean, when I went out there, I was shocked. I remember thinking after day 2, when I was out there with you guys, I remember thinking, God, I wish I had a television crew with me, because there'd be so much stuff to capture,
Oh, yeah. Very interesting, when you come out here and you do this. And, it's not just where we're at. It almost seems like it's all of East Texas. It's Louisiana. I think you actually asked me, well, you guys might have it a little better than most because of where you're at. Well, we might, but, I think that's because of the city of Houston, the city of Dallas, the city of San Antonio. You have these major metropolitan areas. The city of Houston is the third largest city in the United States, or just about. So you think of the landmass that it takes up. Well, if you've got a population here and you've got a larger population, you don't have the square mileage here, that you would in, like, say, Northern California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and then you've got in the Houston, Conroe, Sugarland, Metroplex area, basically, you've got like 8 million people, 8 million people, all right here. So they don't have a place to go, and it keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So you got a large population in a small area, and I think that's part of the reason that we have all that stuff.
Well, and I tend to agree with you. I think in that area that we were at, where we were getting all those vocals, I left for the Houston, or was it the George Bush Intercontinental Airport, and we're only talking like a 25-minute drive, and I was there. And so you're by this major airport, and we really weren't that far out. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we really weren't that far out. It's not like we had to hike 20 miles in to a remote location. And that's a lot of things a lot of other people out there, I don't think, understand, who maybe might live in a city and are listening to this, that you really have to get way out in the woods. And that's not really the case, especially out there. I think they're kind of squeezed into these areas, and that's why you probably have the aggression, but that's why you hear the vocals when you're out there. It's, what was it, Jim Lansdale I had on last week, and one of the quotes that made me laugh, he said, if you can go out to Texas and you don't hear or see a Sasquatch, there's something wrong with you. And he's right, because if you go out there, you're going to hear something. You're going to probably see something. If you don't see anything, you're definitely going to hear them. There's really nothing else that it could be. A lot of times when you hear these vocals.
Jim Lansdale and Bob Garrett, I think you said it, they're cut from the same cloth. And the thing that I've learned the most from both of them, you got to go where they are, but you need to know what you're looking for. It doesn't matter. This is what kills me. I mean, you can get these things on game trail cameras. People argue, they can see the IR from this or that. Well, I don't know if they can or not, but I know for a fact you can get them on game trail cameras. And a good one is the Jacobs creature. You've probably seen that. That is, without a doubt, a Sasquatch. There are other pictures that they've never released, and I think they probably won't ever release them because of, for very good reason. But if you just go pick a spot in the woods and set the camera up and thinking that you're going to get a Sasquatch, I think you're going to fail. I think you need to go out. I think you need to look for signs, and I think you need to put a camera out, and I think you need to leave it out for 3 weeks, a month, or better. But you have to put it in an area that they're in. And I think that's where people fail with the game cameras. That's where, when we go out, we look for certain things. We look for tracks. We look for well-used trails. We look for this. We look for that. If we don't see it, we don't set the flares up. If we see that, we put the flares up. That doesn't mean they're going to come back through in front of the flare, because you're talking about a 2x2x2 screen, and you're only taking about just a fraction of the area you're trying to surveil. I mean, maybe one day they come this way, but the other day they come behind the flare, or they come a different way. They don't always use the same trail twice. They don't ever come to an area the same way twice. Very, very frustrating when you're doing that. But I think the game trail cameras, believe it or not, are not a bad thing. You put them up high, you angle them down, you make sure you're in an area, and you leave it and let it go. And I think a lot of people fail when it comes to doing that, because they just stick them out, let them go for 2 or 3 days, and then come back and get them. Oh, there's nothing on there but a deer.
Yeah, and for people listening, the Jacobs creature for people who aren't aware of it, it was a creature caught on game cam, and it was on all fours, wasn't it, Tim? It was eating apples or something?
No. The Jacobs creature is out of Pennsylvania. The first one that you see is a picture of the creature, and it's on the side of a mountain, basically. It's got I call it getting your golf ball stance. It's bent over with one arm down and one arm back and one leg back. So it's picking its golf ball up. That's the best way I can say to describe it. The second picture is it's bent over at 90 degrees pretty much at the waist with its nose to the ground, sniffing the ground. The interesting thing about it is the guy had a salt lick over there. I don't know what the Squatch was doing.
Wasn't that the one, it was kind of skinny and it was like had patchy hair? And people were saying it was a bear.
Yeah, it was a mangy bear. That's most definitely not a bear.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a bear when I saw it. It's something to where I wish they'd release all of the footage on it or all of the images that were taken, because what you see definitely doesn't look like a bear to me, but, you know, I wasn't there.
I guess what you see whenever if you saw the regular pictures would probably blow a lot of people away, but I'm not going to get into that. I don't think I can. But then again, this is another example. Somebody got a game cam picture of something, and then everybody just is going to freaking butcher it. Well, this guy wasn't a Bigfoot researcher. He just got these pictures out there. And yeah, there are bear cubs in there, but this is most definitely not a bear cub.
Yeah, one last question I want to ask you, because I'm going to get it from the audience if I don't ask it. What signs do you look for? Let's say you're not a tracker like most of your group is, and you're out looking for these creatures. What are some things that you guys look for? What are some things you would recommend for people to look for?
I hate to disappoint everybody, I guess, but we're actually looking for tracks. We're looking for impressions. We're looking for this. We're looking for well-used trails. Well-used trails, the trails are beaten down. They're worn, I guess is the best way to describe them. They're not always as wide as you think they are, and you have to think about how they walk. Look for the trails. Look for that. There's certain, I'm not a stick structure guy, but there are some things, that you can look for as far as stick structures, you know, obvious tree breaks and things like that. These big bows, these arches that people see and everything like that. 99.9 of those I just missed because those occur naturally in nature. You can go into any forest in the world and find those. And that's because it's a younger sapling that doesn't get the light and it bows over. But if you have one that's bowed over like that with another one pinning it down or something like that, then that might be of interest. But you know, I've seen a lot of things that people say are purported Sasquatch sign, and then like really, that's just occurs in nature, you know.
Yeah, a lot of it's
it has to be pretty obvious, you know, a whole tree pulled up by its roots with the end of it sticking out on a root ball on the top. That's interesting. Those sorts of things. But really predominantly what we look for are tracks and trails and things like that, seeing if they're being used. But I have the advantage of having somebody that's researched this area for, 30 years, so.
Yeah, and like I was saying, most of you guys are trackers. Most of you guys are actual trackers. When you go in and look for them, there's so many things to where I know you don't consider yourself a tracker, but I definitely would consider you a tracker, because I know I think it was the second night we were out there, the second or third night. I mean, you went into full blown tracker mode looking, and I think that's when you guys found the footprint. But I think it's interesting. A lot of people, that's probably one of the main questions I get, what to look for, what to look for. And there's always more to it than just, hey, I'll send you pictures of scat and broken tree, branches. There's a lot more to it than that. I know down there, a lot of times where you're at, if you follow the hogs, you'll find the Sasquatches.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I think when you had Mo on, you were talking about, I think he was mentioning about, the two that we saw in the daytime that we actually got on film. We were actually tracking hogs and we run across the, Sasquatch, prints and we tracked them on down, came out to these two washouts or dugouts underneath the bank. And it's kind of hard to describe, but you got to put the embankment up with creek at the bottom. We're on the other side. It's maybe about 5 feet. You go down there and I'm back. I'm actually filming. We're looking at these dugouts in there that were really interesting. Mo's down here and Bob are sitting there looking at this 18-inch track, and I'm up there and I'm looking straight ahead and I'm looking at two of them, and I didn't even know I was looking at them until the one started moving its head. It would look at us and it would look at the other one, and look at us and look at the other one. They told me, hey, come down here and look at this track. I'm like, you guys come up here and look at the two squatches that are sitting here looking at me. And they did, so we all three sat there and watched them. I tried my best to get it on video. I couldn't get it as well as I wanted to because I couldn't look at the viewfinder and keep my eyes trained on them without losing them. You know what I mean? So the video I got is what I got. It's not the best, but it is what it is. It's not like they're going to be 5 feet away from you at every time, So you kind of have to take your evidence and, something like that I'm not going to put out. I'm not going to put out anything that's questionable. I'm not going to put out anything that's like pareidolia. I'm not going to put out anything with a red circle around it and say, oh, look at this. I'm just not going to do it. There's no point in doing that.
Yeah.
You open yourself up to a lot of problems when you do that. I think the best thing to do is if people want to learn or people want to teach is they have to get a mentor that knows what they're doing. They have to spend the time and they have to go in the woods and they have to do it. Sometimes you have to go in pretty deep. Sometimes you don't. It just depends on where you're at. It depends on what you're doing. But it's educating yourself and looking and learning the sign to look for. That's the best thing I can tell you. Like my friend in Mississippi, I think he lives in Ackerman. He actually lives in a perfect spot. He lives across the street from the National Forest. He goes up there all the time. He goes by himself. I don't know how good of a tracker he is, but I mean, he goes out there and he finds a lot of interesting stuff. He's got a lot of good, interesting, things that he comes back with. He gets a lot of evidence. So, I mean, it's just about finding the area and researching what you gotta do your homework first, I guess, is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I think we both agree that going out by yourself is a bad idea. I mean, I think you and I, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I are of the theory that these things do kill people. Are they out every moment that they're awake looking to kill someone? No. But do they kill people, and have they killed people in the past? I would definitely say yes.
Oh yeah, I would say, they're not the cute, cuddly, fuzzy little forest creatures that people seem to think. I mean, every time you see a bear, does a bear kill you? No. Will a bear kill you? Yes. I guess that's the best analogy I've got. If you run into, I don't know if you have grizzly bears where you're at. Do you have grizzly bears or no?
No, we have black bear.
The big black bear? Okay. Well, all right. Every time you see a black bear, pretty much they just run away, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 95% of the time they'll run from you. Out here,
okay,
it's mainly the cougar that'll get you.
Yeah, but the black bear will kill and eat you, though, if they...
Yeah, I mean, if you catch them on the wrong day or you corner them or there's a mother with its cubs, absolutely they'll kill you and probably not even think twice about it.
So how is a friendly forest creature any different?
Right. Right.
I guess that's my point. I think we got to use common sense when we're dealing with this. Are they a wild animal? Yes. Are they a little bit more than that? I'd have to say yes too. Do you really want to take a gamble with your life if you run into this thing and think that it's going to be sit down and sing kumbaya with you and have a cup of tea? I don't think that's going to happen. I think, the best case scenario is it's going to go its direction and you're going to go yours.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario. Sometimes like what happened with you guys when you guys were out with the BFRO or when Bob and I were out, sometimes they don't run the other way. Sometimes they will kind of find a way to try and corner you. But you're right. The best case scenario is you guys are both going to turn and go opposite directions. And people just need to be aware when they go out, whether you believe in Sasquatch or you don't. I would say don't go out alone and carry a firearm for God's sakes, and just be aware of your surroundings because you never know what's going to be out there, especially out in Texas. Everything can kill you in Texas. Tim, thanks for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of the encounter stories and stuff that you've experienced.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Want to thank everyone for listening tonight. If you get a chance, please visit us at SasquatchChronicles.com. Hope everyone had a great weekend, had a great Sunday. On SasquatchChronicles.com, I've been doing a show on Wednesday night. I'm looking to expand that to Friday night as well. But if you've had an encounter and you'd like to come on the show, email me at wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. And when you send your email, please send your contact information to as well along in your email, so we don't play email tag back and forth. If you include all your contact information, I'd love to have you on. I'd love to hear your story. Again, it's wes@SasquatchChronicles.com if you've had an encounter and you'd like to come on the show. Want to thank everyone again. I want to give a shout out to Tyler D on the website. Tyler, thanks for all the kind comments. Really do appreciate it. Other than that, everyone, have a great night.